At 65 years old, adults are twice as likely to be killed or injured by fire. That risk grows with age, doubling by 85. Fire is not the only hazard that threatens our older citizens. Falls lead the cause of death for unintentional injury in the home. 30% of people aged 65 and older are involved in falls each year. This leads to injuries, loss of mobility, and sometimes even death. Reduced mobility hampers movement and may result in failure to escape a fire. Because fire spreads rapidly in the home, sometimes only seconds are left to escape. By giving you the tools and tips to prevent these two issues, we can help you age in place safely. This is Remembering When. You wake up in the middle of the night and your smoke alarm is going off. Are you prepared? Your smoke alarm is going off. Most likely you're tired, you're groggy, you're fuzzy. You don't really know what's going on. So having a little preparation and knowing what to do ahead of time might save a life. Being prepared will save you time. And time during an emergency is critical. Have your essentials on your bedside table. That way, in the event of emergency, when you vacate your house, you can take those with you. Do you wear glasses? Do you need them to see? Have them right next to you. That way, when you wake up, you don't have to search for them. Have a flashlight next to your bed. Have any essential medications you need next to your bed. That way, if there is an emergency, you can take them with you. Always charge your cellular phone at night. Have it on your bedside table. That way, when in an emergency, you can take it with you to your meeting point and dial 911. Once outside, never go back inside the house in the event of a fire or any other emergency. Once your smoke alarm or carbon monoxide detector goes off, leave the house and don't go back for anything. Keep a set of shoes or slippers next to your bed. That way, when you have to vacate the house, you can easily get in them and leave. Take the time to prepare. In an emergency, seconds matter. Summer's here and temperatures are rising, especially inside our cars. Our pets want to remind us that they can't tolerate the heat inside parked cars. On a 78-degree day, a parked car can reach 100 degrees in mere minutes. At 90 degrees, a whopping 109 degrees. Since a dog only cools off by panting, it is extra hard for them to stay cool. It takes less than 15 minutes for brain damage or death from heat stroke. Although your dog loves car rides, it may be their last. If you find an animal in a car and you believe it is in danger, dial 911. Do not attempt to free it on your own. This is illegal in the state of Maine. Only authorized officials are allowed to do so. Your pet can't tell you how hot they are, and you're not psychic, no matter how much you want to believe you are. Keep them cool, that's the rule. Making sure we have the proper footwear can help us prevent having stumbles and falls. But do you know what that footwear is? There are different types of shoes out there with different types of lacing or closures. Some, you can just slide your foot in, and with the knees, pull and tighten. We want to make sure that anytime we wear our shoes, they are appropriately fitted. If they're too loose, we might slip. If they're too tight, it might damage our foot. At a certain age, we should consider functionality and stability of footwear over fashion. High heels and flip-flops can make us unstable and can lead to falls and injuries. Make sure you appropriately tie your shoes and tighten them so they are a comfortable fit. Seek the guidance of experts on what appropriate footwear is best for you. Ask your doctor for advice or a local shoe store for help on choosing shoes. The right footwear can help prevent slips, trips, stumbles, and falls. Wear the right shoes to stay comfortable. Wear the right shoes to stay safe. Combine a lack of flotation device with the frigid temperatures of Maine waters, and you have a recipe for disaster. Woo, that's cold! See? When wearing a life jacket, we all float down here. Save a life, wear a life jacket. I'm here today with Jim Graves, head of Maine Fire Service Institute, to talk about fires that changed the world. Jim, what fire are we going to talk about today?
Today we're going to talk about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire that took place on March 25th, 1911 in Greenwich Village in Manhattan, New York.
Okay. Lead me into the climate at the time. What's going on right then?
Well, the country is extremely busy. This is, pre-World War I. There's a lot of industry in the country at the time. That year was particularly a tough year for fires because later on in the year they had the Iroquois Theater fire that killed over 600 people that we had talked about in a previous episode. So the country was booming. There was a lot of manufacturing going on, and this of course was a shirt ladies' blouses is what they were manufacturing in this factory building.
Okay. Now, describe to me a little bit about the building itself. What are we looking at for the fire to travel in this building?
Okay, so this is a factory building that's 11 stories in height, if I recall, and the factory itself was on the 8th, 9th, and 10th floor of the building, so it's on the upper floors. I don't believe there was a sprinkler system. The fire started underneath one of the cutting tables where they were cutting cloth. Fire broke out. They're not really sure of the cause other than they think it might have been discarded smoking materials. The fire kind of took off, and one of the contributing factors to this fire, leading to 146 deaths, 71 injuries, was the exit doors were locked.
Now, why were the exit doors locked on a building like that?
At the time, they were trying to prevent workers from stealing shirts, and they were trying to keep them from going out and having a cigarette on break. So they were trying to keep them in working.
The workers were locked into this building. What were the conditions that they were dealing with on a daily basis?
I'd imagine that time of year, it's March, so it's probably not very warm, but inside the building it would be very warm from the processes that were taking place. Probably cluttered because, practices were a little different in 1911. There was a lot of these are a lot of young immigrants from Italy and Jewish immigrants from Europe and whatnot working, and they were working ungodly hours, 9, 10-hour days all week long, even on Saturday. So kind of jam-packed with people working and moving the product along is how I would imagine it was.
So it wasn't like, especially at the time, but also because of the people that were working there, it's not like they could just go and complain that the working conditions were poor.
Right. I mean, this is, the unions were starting to develop, and as a matter of fact, there was a union that came in place after this fire, and that was called the, bear with me, it was the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, so it's the ILGWU, and they started to fight for better working conditions in what they considered sweatshops. So I don't want to use words that are inflammatory, but it was a sweatshop in some cases.
And why do you say that? What would lead you to that conclusion?
Just the way they treated the workers, jammed them in there, and they didn't really take their safety. It was all about the product, getting the product out, making money, increasing efficiencies, and looking into it, the way they paid them, $7 to $12 a week. Looking up in 2016, that equated to about $171 a week. So these people were making $3.20 an hour. So there was no minimum wage at the time. They were just using people. Still, and that's a spillover from the 1800s. Growing up in northern New Hampshire, we always studied the mills in Manchester where they used child labor. And literally they would lose a child every once in a while in a factory accident, and they would just put the body outside so the family could come and get it. It's kind of disturbing, but that's what took place.
Yep. So let's talk about the fire.
So as the fire broke out, obviously there's a lot of materials for the fire to grow rapidly, and there was very little way for these individuals to get out. So 62 of them jumped to their death, including a very famous part to this fire is the Lover's Leap, where a man and woman were seen in a window kissing and holding one another as they jumped to their death. So there were, you know, firefighters were injured too from people jumping and landing on the ground around where they were trying to make their firefighting efforts. They had no ladders to reach up that high at the time. I mean, we still don't have ladders to reach a lot of those high places, as we know. So, and back then in 1911, they didn't have trucks that would be able to set up and reach that high. So they had to fight their way up through the interior of the building to try to get those doors forced open. By that time, it was too late.
Yeah. So I can imagine, especially that high up, that time period with firefighting equipment, it must have been arduous conditions trying to just combat that fire.
Absolutely. I mean, the conditions that they had to deal with back then, even in the tenements around that area, if you think about it, and must have been horrible. I can't imagine. It's definitely a tough fire for the firefighters to deal with.
Yeah.
They were using steam engines, horse-drawn engines, in 1911. So.
And that doesn't produce the kind of volume of water that we get today.
Absolutely. You know, there's so many variables. So.
Yep. Now let's talk a little bit about the results of the fire.
So, obviously, this fire took place in New York City, and they looked at it. They took it very seriously. Looked at what problems were. So there was, you know, inspections of buildings, sprinkler systems, standpipe systems. All these things started to come into play. Better exiting, enforcing you can't lock doors to keep people in, things like that. So there was a lot of things that come out of that. And then, of course, later in the year, the Iroquois Theater fire, and that too gained momentum. So that the movement for fire protection and protecting individuals started to grow in the early 20th century.
So these fires, especially the one we're talking about right now, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, set the stage for future codes.
Absolutely, absolutely. Future codes for industrial and high-rise buildings and what they needed to have for safety measures put in place to keep people safe.
And I can imagine, too, that was very important at the time because industrialization in America was basically at the height right then.
And it absolutely was.
You had all these buildings being built, and you know people were looking to the skies rather than keeping lower buildings. So those codes must have been really important to make America safer as it moved on.
Absolutely. I mean, you get into some of the workplace safety, you know, guards and stuff like that on machinery, and instead of just having belts come down from the old steam power or water powered, you know, they were covered up and guarded so people couldn't get sucked into them, or some of the other processes in garment making, wooling. I mean, in Maine, we had a huge woolen industry in the state years ago, textiles and woolen industry. Hathaway Shirt, right in the city of Waterville where I used to work, was a big factory that did this sort of thing. So in the early 90s when I worked in Waterville and we did tours of the Hathaway factory, I kind of thought a little bit about what it might have been like at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, where you have hundreds of people on, in this case, the 4th floor, stitching, and I mean, it was very loud. So I can imagine the process here was the same.
Yeah. So these were just people trying to make a living,
Right.
you know, just working every day, and unfortunately this tragedy occurs. But again, something good came from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you start to get into child labor laws and stuff like that. I mean, the youngest person that died in this fire was 14 years old, and the oldest was 43. So, and a lot of them didn't speak English. There was language barriers too, so they didn't understand what each other was saying. They didn't speak English because they were from Italy and they only spoke Italian. They didn't speak, I guess it would be Yiddish, from the Jewish immigrants that came from Europe. So there was communication barriers, which we still see that today. You know, there's 29 languages spoken in Portland now. When I was a kid, that was unheard of. You know, so things are changing.
Well, do you have any concluding remarks you want to make about the fire?
This is one of the tragedies. There's many of them. When you think through history, it's always been an interesting study for me to look at the fires from the past. This is just one of many, 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 many fires. I mean, we talked about some of the larger fires in the country, but there's still been fires in nursing homes that have killed 20 people. There was a fire in a daycare facility in Maine back in the 40s while a lot of the men were off to war in World War II, where we lost a number of children in a fire because the women were called into the factories and these kids were put into homes where they were taken care of. And I believe this fire was in Auburn. And we lost a number of children. So we work every day, our state's fire marshal's office, we work every day. Our job is to train our state's firefighters or to assist in that. But the state fire marshal's office works very hard with a lot of code officials in towns, much like Brunswick, that try to keep people safe. So I would like to ask everyone to do us a favor and look through your home, make sure it's fire safe, look for things that could cause trouble. Not only save your life, but it could save the life of a firefighter or a neighbor or anyone. So take fire prevention and fire safety very serious.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again, Jim.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime.
Yeah. Welcome back to our segment on fraud awareness. I'm here again with Jane Margison from AARP and Commander Mark Waltz of the Brunswick Police Department. How are you both doing today?
Great, thank
Good.
you.
Glad to hear it. So, in-person scams, is that what we're going to talk about today?
And this is, maybe we'll call it the old-fashioned scams.
Sure.
This is someone that, even this was happening 30 years ago, is they come to your house and say, hey, I noticed your driveway needs to be sealed. Can I seal your driveway? Or maybe they're going to redo your roof, or they think you need some tree work, and they're going to trim your trees. If people are coming door to door, they have to be licensed. So one way to try to tell the real person from the not is ask to see their licensing information. Many times you're lucky if they do no work. Sometimes the worst thing is they do some work. You might think they're sealing your driveway and all they're doing is putting oil on it. Or maybe they don't know what they're doing, tree cutting, and they cut a limb and it hits your house. Or we had a guy a few years ago that was a roofer that was, if your worst case scenario was he took your roof off, put a blue tarp on, and you never heard from him again. So the better scenario was if he actually just didn't do anything yet. But the good thing about these cases is that oftentimes we're able to catch the person and hold them accountable because it's usually someone's local. If someone's coming to your door, they've got some type of a local connection. So it's a lot easier for us to figure out who they are, arrest them, catch them. So if someone's coming, sometimes people come to your door to sell things legitimately, but don't be afraid to ask for their credentials, their state license. Don't be afraid to ask, figure out who they are, write the license plate down on the car that's there. And let's say you do need your driveway done, it's probably still worth getting a few estimates. Just because someone came to your door doesn't mean they're the best one that you should hire. And then the other thing that sometimes happens is these people may or may not do a decent job on your driveway, but they've also scoped out your house, and we've had cases where they come back and burglarize it because maybe some of the employees aren't the most reputable people. So if you're having home improvements done, it's probably a good idea to call people and check, make sure they're bonded, make sure they're insured, licensed contractors, and so that's a better way to protect yourself.
If, let's say, people in the neighborhood, small neighborhood, notice that someone went door to door, going around, like you said, take down license plate number, any kind of information, would it be prudent to contact the police department, just give a heads up, say, someone I noticed went door to door throughout our neighborhood today and it seemed a little suspicious?
Absolutely. And let's say you didn't get a chance to get their license number or information, we're more than happy to go try to find them. So if you call up and say, on the street, notice this person's going door to door, say they're selling driveway stuff, whatever, we'll go talk to them and see if they're licensed and get the information in case maybe they're legitimate. Frequently, the legitimate people actually call us at the police department in advance. They say, I'm going to be over in the Meadowbrook neighborhood today, knocking on doors, selling such and such, just want you to know in case you get a phone call. So you may call up and we'll tell you, yes, we've heard from that person. But we're more than happy to look into it and try to sort it out, so don't hesitate to call. And nothing says you have to open your door. So sometimes the best thing is just ignore the person, and then you don't have to deal with the issue.
Right.
The other thing is that you should have a 3-day period to review the proposal from a contractor. And in the state of Maine, you get the 3 days to, even if you've signed something and you've got an actual contract, you have 3 days to change your mind for whatever reason. And the Attorney General has a wonderful website all about these types of scams or potential scams. And as Commander Waltz said, I mean, a lot of the transient, they're called workers, repair personnel, they may be perfectly legitimate who are coming in even from another state to do business in Maine. They may be just fine, but they would need to have a license and they would need to have, you know, registered, as it were, with the state before conducting any business here. So you have certain rights as a consumer, and I think it's just being, you know, proactive about finding out what those rights are before you start signing things and giving money to people that you don't know.
Yeah. Again, it seems to always come down to stop, take a minute, think about
Right.
it, you know, kind of rationalize, does this seem normal? Does this seem right? And then move on from there. This does seem like it's almost the current version of the carpetbagger, you know, of the old term, the Yankee peddler. And it's interesting that it's gone from that to trades now. So
And if you're having work done on your house, there has to be a written contract, and there's limits to how much money can be collected up front. So another reason where we'll be talking about take a step back, think about it, ask for the contract before you let them do any work, look at it, again, talk to this trusted friend that we've talked about in many episodes and things, and think about it before you spend any money.
And some of these, the scams associated with these home repairs, etc., you can almost set your watch by them because many of them are seasonal. So during the winter, we have this deluge of people who come to the state of Maine, very often from out of state, who are all about getting the snow out of your driveway or off of your roof or something like that. And some of them may be legitimate businesses that are great to do business with, but just be very careful. And I would definitely check them out before you let anybody up on your roof or in your home, or, you know, just paying money to people you don't know. In the summertime, in the spring, that's when we get a lot of the driveway. Let me repave. I just did, you know, a driveway for your neighbor, or I've got all this extra equipment and I can give you a deal if I've got all this lumber left over or something. There are different ways that they try to kind of reel you in, usually with promises of some kind of a discount.
is there usually pressure on the deal expiring, and that's why there's such a grasp at trying to get it immediately?
can
They've got some
be.
extra hot top in their truck they just need to get rid of. They have the load left over. They just
Yeah.
did your neighbor's driveway. Can I do yours? Exactly. There's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, so there's the fear that if they don't act that instant, they'll lose out on that deal and won't get it at that cheap price.
Exactly.
And the fact is, it can be a little intimidating if somebody's at your door, whether they're male or female, at your door saying, I've got this thing, I need to do this business, I'm going to do it quickly, I did your driveway of your neighbor, or whatever. It can just be an uncomfortable situation anyway, so I'm really with Commander Waltz. I would rather not open my door to somebody I don't know.
Yep.
If they have a card, they can leave it, and then you can do some follow-up afterwards.
Yeah, it sounds that it could be dizzying, like
Yes.
the whole effect itself can just, really fast-paced, want you to get it done. I'm here at your door, this is where you live, but now you feel unsafe, it's as if your
Yeah.
sanctuary itself is being invaded. That's very unfortunate that people will take advantage of, especially someone's home, their domicile, where they feel really comfortable.
And something you may not think about is the least of your problems might be the money you pay them to shovel the snow off your roof. If they're not an insured contractor and they fall off your roof, which could likely happen if they're up there, then you could get sued for that.
Yeah.
So it could get pretty expensive pretty quick.
One thing that I'm thinking about is we all live in a state that, I love that you bring up snow removal off the roof. We all live in a state that has, just massive amounts of snow. We have really cold winters. What about preparing ahead of time, knowing who in your neighborhood you can use to shovel off your roof or to shovel your walkway and your path?
Now, that's a great suggestion.
is,
And,
yeah.
and talk to your friends. Who do you use? Who do they
Yeah.
recommend? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great thing to do. I've done that myself, where you've got kind of your list of, here's the plumber, here's the electrician, here's, you know, the handy person who can help out with whatever, and you know them, you've already vetted them, and so when something happens where you need the snow to be removed from your roof, you know you're going to be working with someone you trust.
Right. In the long run, I feel I'm going to be using someone that I know, or at least, like you said, have vetted,
Yeah,
instead
word
of
of
someone just
mouth.
knocking at my door. I think would have the suspicion of someone just coming in and be like, I'd love to do work for you.
No, well, you're right. I think you're right to be a little suspicious, because I think those days of people coming by, which before the internet, before, you know, we were all sort of connected in these other ways, that might have been a little bit more of a usual business practice. But these days it's a little bit more unusual. So.
And I think, you know, if you tried to hire a tradesman lately, they're really busy and they're hard to get. So if someone is so little business, they're knocking on doors, they're probably not someone you want doing the
That's a
work.
good point too.
Are there any other scams or any other, like you said, old-fashioned scams that you can think of while we're talking about this?
I think it's just the 40% of scams, or actually it's higher than that, excuse me, I think it's closer to 70% of scams are conducted by telephone. That's still kind of the top way to reach people, but there are so many scams associated with, you know, we've talked in a prior episode about the tech support and reaching people by email, but the door-to-door piece is still one that we do hear about. There are companies that will also, who are not legitimate, who will use younger college-age students, for example. We had one of these recently where they were, I think that they were doing some kind of a home repair, and the students themselves didn't know that they were part of a scam. They were being paid to do a job, but ultimately, when it came down to it, the overall umbrella business was not on the up and up. So I think it's just, unfortunately, the onus is on the consumer to be wary and, as we've said before, to be their own best fraud fighter and not be the next victim. But in order to serve effectively in that role, you have to be willing to pick up the phone and call the police, or, you know, do some homework about home repair individuals with whom you wish to do business. So you just have to kind of, I think, do the stop and verify as much as you possibly can.
The other older one I might throw in is, say, the raffle one. Maybe you're at a fair or at a mall, and there's something, fill out this card for a free trip to Florida, for a 4-night hotel or whatever. Then a couple weeks later you get a phone call with someone, oh, you won, and whoops, you have to pay a little extra to add this add-on or something. But if you don't want to deal with that phone call or have to try to sort it out, just don't enter those raffles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you. So informative. I'm sure our viewers at home got a lot out of that. Again, the biggest thing we keep seeing is protect yourself, take a moment, stop, think about what's being presented to you, and then take your time and think about it. Really, there's no harm in stopping. There's no harm in taking some time. No one should pressure you into taking any
Right.
service, or really, like we talked about today, if someone's knocking at your door looking to do a job for you and you didn't call them to begin with, there should be some suspicion. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All the links are on the screen and at the end of the show. And until next time, stay safe.